All right. Is it
Here we
recording?
are.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good morning, Jeremiah.
Good morning. And I made a mistake and used my mouse, and I was like, oh God, please tell me it's still recording.
Oh gosh, right?
Yeah.
Then it would have just been another private party.
That's right. We've already had a good conversation already, so.
Yeah, we did. It's so interesting. As we were talking, I was like, we should be recording this conversation because we were talking about self-care for teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, we were
Great.
talking some deep stuffs.
Great stories from the classroom. Yeah. That actually.
My favorite memory.
Yeah, it's super fun. I'm trying not to laugh too loud because I moved into my office and it echoes like crazy, so I don't want it to be like, you know what I mean? So, um, anyway, thank you for sharing those. It's a wonderful story.
Kids are the best. That's all
Yeah.
I'm gonna say. Kids are the best, and I have 100 stories that they're just kids are the best. They're just
fun.
the best.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jenna. So this week you were able to finish your book, and so I'm really looking forward to
I was able
hearing.
to finish my book.
And I don't know why it took me until I was writing the thing up last week to realize that the name of the book is called The Ballad of the Song of. Mm-hmm. How do you say it? The Ballad of
Songbirds and Snakes.
And Snakes. There we go. I was like, songs. There's something more to that. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Yeah. I don't know why I thought that was the title. I thought that was like part of your description of it.
Oh, I like that.
It just kind of like felt like it was a flow of it, and I was like, oh no, that's actually the title. Oh, that makes a lot more sense. So anyway, this week I had previously read this, so it's not something I finished this week, but it is something I have recently finished. We were doing this actually as a book study for my work, and it's funny because I'm literally staring at the first book I read of Dr. Bowler's, and it's trying to decide like what to say about it. So the book itself is really good. If you're familiar with her stuff, I don't know if there's anything that's really new per se in the book. She tends to have a lot of repetition in what she presents and what she talks about, for lots of reasons, I think. But what I really liked about the book was that she went into a lot of the things that she had said previously. Like, she made a claim and said there was evidence for it, but really didn't cite the study or where she was pulling that evidence from. And so in the book, she spends a lot more time going into that and saying, oh, it's from this study, or this and this kind of go together. So there was a lot more depth behind the stories. And then there was a lot more stories as well. So I really like that. And the thing that was really surprising to me is there's 4 people in the book that she interviewed that I know personally. And so it was really cool to like be reading it. And I knew one of them was in here, but I didn't know the others were in here. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, hey, oh my gosh, I know that person. And so it was really cool to like, to see their story and then kind of like to see them in a new light. That's really exciting. Like, it's just kind of amazing how everyone out there, we're talking about this job that we love, right? Like how everyone has a story, and every kid every morning comes to us like with their own story, and like it just kind of makes it kind of ties together the humanness of all of this. And like you talk about like second graders earlier, how they're at that age where they still love school and they're still excited about things. And second grade is my favorite grade to actually teach lessons in for that reason, because they're old enough to do stuff, but they're young enough to like be excited about stuff, and they're like curious to try things.
And it's so easy to excite second graders.
Yeah.
Like, I could get them to do anything. We're going to get on our hands and knees. Pick up all the trash. Like, all it took was that level of excitement. They were like, yes, we are.
And like, we've kind of helped raise 2 girls that are, they're 11 now. And I've seen that every year that kind of excitement diminish more and more and more. So like in kindergarten, it was like this peak of like, they'd come home and we'd do experiments, and it was super fun. And then first grade was was a rough year. In the second grade, it kind of came back and was there. And then, third grade was still there, but it was kind of less. And the fourth grade was there, but it was kind of less. And then fifth grade, it was a lot less. And then last year it was like almost not there at all. And now they're going to be seventh graders this year. And it's like, they're like, whatever. So it's just kind of sad. Like, I don't know what it is about us that we change over time, that kind of like, or if it's the school system itself, how it kind of like grinds the curiosity and all of that out of them, and
think about all the troubles that like teachers who want to be innovative get into. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so now like imagine, and teachers we don't have actual power, but it looks like we might have power in the district.
Right.
I don't know, maybe some districts, not that all districts, I'm not saying that. Anyways, the moral of the story is, some teachers do get, and so if teachers feel that way, imagine how students feel.
Right, absolutely.
That was my point.
Yeah, that it's so regimented, and like, you have to be this and this, and then like, and learning is so not like ABC. It's not a factory line kind of thing. It's much more of this weird like exponential growth, and then long plateaus, and then some recesses, and then an exponential growth again. Like there's all these random things, and like I think about my own learning. Like I randomly do crazy weird things just to play around, and then all of a sudden that application has this great application later on in some random thing. Like
absolutely.
So anyways, so the book is really cool. That like it was just refreshing to realize, like, with so much negativity in the world, it really goes into like you are the captain of your own ship, and while you can't control things that are happening out there, you can really focus on learning things. And like, something as a kid, like in college, I really struggled with math, and like I used to think I was really good at it, and then I used to think I was really bad at it, and then it went through this thing, and it kind of like, there was something internal in me that was like, it was hard. So I was like, well, F you, I'm going to try to, climb the hardest mountain I could find. And so for me, it was physics that kind of like.
Interesting. I love that.
Yeah. So I actually took purposely the most difficult route through college, through the hardest major, because I kind of felt like, if I'm going to get beat up, I'm going to fight back, kind of thing.
If you're going to fight, you're going to go to the big arena.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah. And so like, but I did wonder, like, that was a lot of hard work for me to get to that point where like I could do those things. And then, and she talks about like anyone can learn math, to the highest levels or whatever like that. And I always wondered, like I don't think that's not true, but I do think like the journey there is much more difficult for some. And like that balance of like, what does that mean to say that so I still struggle with this idea of this notion that anyone can learn anything. Like, I don't doubt that it's true. I just don't know, like, it's kind of like a logarithmic function, right? Like some like logs grow really, really slow. So,
right.
10 to the 100th power, right, is only, that's a really huge number. But if you take the log of that, it's only 100. So it's a very small number considering how big that number is. So like, like for me to learn, like me personally, for me to learn like topography wouldn't be too difficult, but to learn topology, right, would be, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know if that's something I could do in my lifetime. Like,
I wonder if I could change one word, it might change the meaning. Instead of any, it's what I mean is, let me switch that. I like that it's anybody can learn anything instead of everybody can learn everything. Because I feel like that's where we get a lot of our stress, is we feel like we should be this jack of all trades, right? Like that's the Pinterest perfect teacher. They have a Cricut, they have a laminator, they spend hours, aligning their bulletin boards, like that everything mentality kind of gets a little exhausting. And so that's what I like about Dr. Buller's message. I also think she does a great job of explaining the hidden curriculum. Well, not that. Yeah, that hidden curriculum, that limited beliefs that we have that we don't even realize that we might be putting on ourselves or our
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
or our staff members, or our colleagues. Like,
Yeah.
when you limit yourself, you limit everyone else. I was just
Absolutely.
listening to an amazing talk by Brene Brown. Have you read any
Oh, yeah.
Brene Brown?
Brene Brown's recently discovered gem.
I love Brene Brown,
Yeah.
Dr. Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was just listened to a talk this morning, and she talked about the science of trust, and because you need to have trust to have any kind of relationship, even a friendship. And so, even like just basic work colleagues, you need to have trust in order for that relationship to function. And she broke trust down into these steps. I'm not going to go all over all of them, but it was like, I think the acronym is BRAVING. And it was all about, like, you have to be gentle and forgiving and generous and honest and have integrity with yourself. You have to trust yourself before you can genuinely trust anybody else, and before anybody else can genuinely trust you. And she quoted Maya Angelou, and Maya Angelou said, "I don't trust anybody who doesn't love themselves and says, 'I love you.'" And that was me. I was spreading love, but I didn't have any love for myself.
Wow. Yeah.
And so what I love about what Dr. Bowler does is those moments that aren't necessarily teaching ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but man, I would have loved for a teacher to tell me, like I tell my kids, that mistakes are normal, that they're celebrated, that they're evidence of learning, and that we're all human. And like, even down like to social stuff, people do and say things that hurt each other, but they don't necessarily mean to hurt each other. And if you can look at what somebody says to you with generosity, you have to first be able to tell that inner voice that's constantly telling you you're not enough, you're not good at this, nobody likes you, you're not pretty enough, you're not whatever enough, whatever that is. It needs to, you got to learn how to separate, like, that's not real. That's just your thought structure. And I think talking about this hidden curriculum, it helps kids understand that they're not the only one that has that negative voice in their head, and that they're not the only one struggling with that negative self-talk. And if you as an adult, or as, whoever's watching this, if you yourself can conquer that negative self-talk, all of a sudden it's so much easier to accept others without judgment. And that changes everything.
It does.
Like, this transition of mine has left me with less friends, but more meaningful relationships.
Nice.
And I just think that that's what Dr. Boulder does really well. She talks about that hidden curriculum and that limitless thinking, and helping kids identify where they think their own limits are. Like, I had a second grader this year who the first time she said it, I shut it down. She said, "I can't read." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you said that," because it was the way that I introduced the power of yet. And so then that same student was saying, "I can't read yet. I can't read yet." And then, because I knew that was her interior monologue, when we were doing guided reading, I would be like, "Look at all this that you're doing." By the end of the year, she was like, "I can read. I used to not be able to read."
That's cool.
I didn't really do much for instruction with that kid, but here,
Yeah.
So that's what I love about Dr. Bowler.
Absolutely.
What a great share.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I highly recommend it. It's an easy read. It pulls through. I mean, it's just, her writing is pretty fluid. So it's a really nice, quick read. And it's one of those things, like, especially with all the, craziness happening in the world right now, like, if you just kind of wanted a breath of fresh air, it's a great way to breathe. So,
that's really nice.
Yeah.
I love that. A breath of fresh air. Because that's, when I read Dr. Bowler's work, that's exactly how it feels to me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's like, you get deep into curriculum and like
Yeah.
lesson plans and blah blah blah, and then you read something from Joe Bowler and you're like, oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. And then you can go back and, get your stuff done.
Yeah. Well, and I also really like, from someone who is someone who really enjoys math, the fact that she stresses the visualization and stuff like that of math, and like how she ties in these seemingly activities that you may not at first feel like they're what math is supposed to be like. I've found, having dived into those, like there's so much richness, and like my own understanding just grows so much, because now not only do I have a picture that matches the analytical stuff, I also have a connection that bridges that, and then seeing something from multiple viewpoints. It's kind of like watching your favorite movie, right? Like the movie doesn't change, but you change as a person. So every time you see it, you probably pull out something new, or like it reminds you of something.
Absolutely. I
So I
love
really
that.
love it. So
Uh,
what did you read, Jenna? Let's talk about songbirds and snakes.
yes. So, I'm really not happy about it. So, some compliments, if I may. Of course, the writing structure is beautiful. Of course, by the end of it, I'm willing to forgive President Snow for all of his future atrocities, because I see, where he's coming from. And of course, there's this moment of choice that he has to make. And I knew it was coming. And I knew what choice would be made, because this is a prequel, which means we already know the future. I'm still really annoyed about the way that it ended. It was so abrupt. I mean, and it's told it's not like the Hunger Games is told from first person point of view. I. This one is told in not omnipotent third, but like the one where it's like one character is the heaviest, main character, third person, and it was all around Coraline Snow. So you knew Katniss because you were her interior monologue. You were her. You were the I as you were reading it. With the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, you're separated from Coriolanus through this third person narrative, or this third person strategy. What do you call that? Point of view?
Point of view, frame of reference?
Yeah.
Something
like that.
Yeah. I know there's a term for it.
Yeah, there's some term for it. If you know the term, comment down below. Be like, it's this, Jenna. But you're separated. So I guess that's the point, right? Like, you read the book, you understand that it's third person, even if you don't understand it intellectually, maybe you understand it emotionally. You know who he's going to grow up to be, so you kind of always keep something in your pocket as an idea. So, like, God, on reflection, I guess, I just don't like the way it ended. It ended too abruptly. I know there's going to be lovers of the story who are going to be like, oh, it's all there. Because, I mean, looking back on it, I've only read it once versus Hunger Games, which I've read dozens of times. So I guess I could read it again and look at it again, but it's like 98% of this amazing book. And then it totally peters out at the end. And my thinking is the reason it's petering out at the end is because Suzanne Collins has another book in her. And that what I feel unsatisfied by, not knowing about this particular character, I think the next book might address all of that from that character's point of view, so that I am satisfied and I do know where that character ended up.
When you say peters out, in what way?
It's just like, okay, so because I can't give away any plot points. It's like this. Everything makes sense. It's complicated. I get it. Like, it's really challenging to so Coriolanus is struggling with this idea of chaos and contract, and there's another C word, control. And it's the idea that, like, without control, there will be no social contract, and without the social contract there will be chaos, I think is the idea. So that's basically what he struggles with the whole book. So it's like 98% of it is this really interesting dissection of who he is and what his motivations are, but it's told from a third person point of view, so you don't as intimately trust him or intimately know him like you know Katniss. It peters out because it comes to a conclusion too fast. I feel like this is where the conclusion begins and this is where the conclusion ends, and there's something missing right here. There's just sometimes it's almost like a writer's writing a book and they're like, I have no idea how to finish this, so they just go, and they lived happily ever after, and you're just kind of left going, it felt like that. I'm not saying that was the ending, that they lived happily ever after. I'm just saying it felt like, and we're done. Right at a critical point when everything was coming together in such an interesting way. And so my point is, I think maybe Suzanne Collins has another book that's going to come out that will take up where it started and then give this that I'm missing and then carry on with the rest of the story. I mean, I've given her a lot of trust.
Which we learned earlier is fundamental for any kind of relationship. So
it's true. Even like fan and object of fandom.
I'm gonna go yes.
Fan-e and fan?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. So it was successful in changing your perspective of Snow.
Yeah, but I'm not human. Like, I get that. I mean, I get fundamentally that humans are flawed because I am fundamentally flawed. And I generally tend to treat people gently who, have their own things, because I have my own things. And again, it's that self-love and that self-acceptance and that self-generosity that allows me to be that version of myself that I always wanted to be with humans.
That makes sense. Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, so it's like, so it was easy for me to be like, all right, I'll listen to this kid's story. I don't like him, but I'll listen to it. But
in the end,
I don't know. The ending left me. No, I never liked him.
Okay.
And I never liked him. I never liked him. In fact, I thought something else was going on from the beginning. And I don't know if that's true. That could be why I feel so dissatisfied here, because there might be a plot point that you can't really make out on your own. But maybe, it's hard to talk about without ruining it for everybody, because it's is it worth reading? Yes. Yes, it's
do you feel like the book was a good exercise in empathy?
It was a good exercise in
empathy?
Yeah. And the novel I'm writing is all about a society that breaks down, and all these people who were former enemies and separated through this stratum, through the stratified hierarchy of social class, now have to all live together at the same level.
Whoa, interesting.
Thank you. And so I'm working on that for Camp NaNoWriMo, which is like the writing month of July. And so I'm totally into that. Like, I love that idea of, and I think it's really valuable right now to ask that question. How do you look at someone who you believe is an enemy through what can you look for in your enemy that's the same as in you? And how can you come to a point in which, even though you may not agree, you don't look at someone with venomous hate? Because I think about like the Rwandan, here we go. I think about the Rwandan genocide. Not, I mean, like all the time, but I think about it. It's neighbor against neighbor picking up machete. And that's scary in a time in which we are so divided.
Right.
And that whole thing happened because the government stepped in and told one group of people they were better than the other.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I wonder what could have happened in Rwanda that would have built a community in spite of the government separation.
Hmm.
It reminds me of a social experiment, and then I'll stop talking.
No, you did a lot of deep thoughts there.
Well, it reminds me of this. So there's this social experiment where, and I participated in college, as in the professor did it, not as in like I signed up for anything, where it was like, if you had blue eyes, you were able to sit in a chair. And you had the whole classroom, and if you had brown eyes, you had to go up against the desk and the wall. And I actually did this in my classroom, but I did a baby version that lasted 3 minutes because I didn't want to hurt anybody's little soul. You know what I mean? Like those things matter, and like the conversations we had after were super intense and gratifying for all of us.
Sure.
But here's the thing so this is the point I'm making. I was a brown eye up against the wall, and I didn't even question it. I just was like, okay, here I go. And then the teacher proceeded to teach a lesson, and that's when the stakes were raised, right? Because there's all of us crammed. There's like probably 40 people crammed into an area that's only 2 people deep. That's the length of the classroom.
Wow, yeah.
And we're all trying to take notes, and then you have the blue-eyed people with all of the desks. And at the end of the experiment, she brings us together and she says, and this is never gonna leave me, because I think this was a moment in which I was like, that's who I want to be. She said, not once in all of her years of doing this experiment, and you talk to the blue eyes and they're like, I felt so guilty. I had all this space and these guys had nothing. So then the teacher said, what's interesting is that in all my years of doing this, not once I never said that you couldn't share. I never said a blue-eyed person couldn't share their space with a brown-eyed person. That wasn't against the rules, but it never occurs to anybody to make the offer. And my brain was like, oh, that's who I want to be. I want to be the person whose instinct is to make the offer.
Yeah. Breaking the mold. That's cool. I love it. Huh.
So I have no idea what I'm going to read this week. I've got to decide that at some point. But actually, I'm going to read Coraline. I've never read Neil Gaiman before.
Okay.
So, you know what? Actually, I might have 2 books done by the time we talk next, because I'm thinking I'm going to read Coraline. It's only like 4 hours. It's a short book. I had no idea. Yeah. Have you read anything by Neil Gaiman?
I've read Coraline I think it was 20 years ago. It's been a while.
Really? Before the movie came out?
Yeah.
How did you feel about the movie, having had read the story years before?
It was one of those things where, like, you know how, like, when you have the image in your head, right, of what it's supposed to look like, and then you see someone else's interpretation, you're like, that's not what it is. And then you ever go back to it and you have that other person's interpretation, it kind of like changes the whole perspective. It's one of those journeys where, like, it was, and plus, the differences between adaptation of literature versus, cinematic film. It's funny. I hadn't thought about it until just now, but it's one of those things where, I'll go hours into this, but let's make it quick. So, like, I'd always thought of, like, literature as, like, storytelling, right? And, like, movies were something that was entertaining, sometimes could make a point, but never was actually, like, storytelling. And then someone that was in movie school, a friend of mine, was like, I have to tell a story in my movie. And it was like one of those weird moments where you realize that, like, they're telling a visual story, where in a book, your mind is providing that, right? So, like, not saying one is better than the other or anything like that, but the fact that, like, that's a lot of onus. It's a very different perspective to be able to, like, tell a visually compelling story. And, and along with, it has, like, kind of like 4 dimensions to it in a way, like a movie is.
Ooh, I love that idea. Will you tell me a little bit more about the 4 dimensions?
Yeah. So you have audio, you have visual imagery, right? And then you also have space and time, right?
Because, obviously, yes.
Right. So you have your 4 dimensions in those 4.
Space and time. I put space and time in one because I'm a fool.
Yeah. Because you
That's
have
how the universe ends, right? Is when you
right.
put space and time together.
So like it's just like this beautiful thing where like as an example, like you can see a picture in a book and that kind of provides that visual thing, but that it's a static image. You don't hear it, you don't see it move, you don't see the space that it's involved in. And so like you can make a very interesting visual piece, but like think about like as humans how much we communicate in terms of like our our tone, our nonverbals, like so we're missing a lot of, and our brain fills those in when we read them, which is usually through the lens of our own experiences, right? So like um so it was really interesting to see that like one of the things that's hard for me watching a movie of a book, especially if I've read the book first, is that my interpretations of it would be, oh, it would be better if they did this or this or this, or like that's not how it plays out in my head, right?
Right.
Like the story they told doesn't satisfy me because
Yes.
I have my own story, but my storytelling would never satisfy anybody else either because they have their own stories, right? Like
Yeah, I think that's like, you get that nerd rage when people are like, this isn't my Star Wars. And I'm like, yeah, you didn't write it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Write your own if you like. But like that level of like love.
A passion, right? And like
It's
that's just something to the strength of the story when it does invoke those reactions in people, right? Like when you have a group of people passionate enough to have like actual legitimate rage come out of it, And I think of like sorry, I was just gonna say I was thinking
please.
John, oh shoot, Favreau, right? Wrote and did a lot of the work behind The Mandalorian recently on Disney Plus.
Oh.
And I always think of John Favreau from Friends as Monica's boyfriend who was doing like the UFC fighting thing, right? And like like I have that one
the millionaire that
or
I've
like,
watched a lot of Friends, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Or like
I think his
Swingers.
name was Pete, as a matter of fact.
I think you're right. I think that might be so like or from Swingers and seeing him from that perspective.
Yes.
And so it's so weird to like think of him as like not only like someone who's producing and directing films, which he's done a lot of already, but like he's actually producing something that most people are pretty passionate about, which is Star Wars, and like writing and extending into the universe.
Wow.
And telling a story that like not only was really good, but like a lot of people like a lot of people had rave about. And it was good. I enjoyed it.
I haven't watched it yet, but David has, and he says it's amazing. So it's on my list.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. I've watched them a couple times.
I'm gonna have to put it in a circulation.
Yeah. So, anyways,
well, goes back to David. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
David went to school for filmmaking.
Oh, did he really? Oh, nice.
He did, and so he is a huge movie nerd. Like to the nth degree.
Love it.
Like deep. Like he does podcasts. He's got a podcast with his buddies called Binge Watchers.
Nice.
And like these three dudes just get really drunk and they talk about movies that they've watched.
That's awesome.
It's hilarious. And they've been doing it for years. And they have like at one point they were like #1 in their niche. And it was just amazing.
That's awesome.
So I hear a lot of conversations about movie making. And he's like, there's a huge podcast that by Mike White, and I can't remember the name of the podcast. I want to say it's the Projection Booth, but I could be wrong. And I mean, it's like this serious thing. Like this dude is the real deal when it comes to movie podcasts. David's been on there, and he's going to be on there again. Like
that's super cool.
So like I have this constant, and like when we watch movies together, like movies we really enjoy, like Midsummer, like. You put a movie in front of us that we've watched multiple times, and we're having those conversations about, oh man, I love how the director made this shot look like this because this is exactly what this is. And the understanding of those elements made me a better teacher because it made me think about those hidden curriculum, like the choices we make. You can either make a choice out of convenience and desperation, or you can make an intentional choice. It takes more time and energy to make the intentional choice. And I make in the classroom, I probably like lean on my instinct 90% of the time,
Mhm.
desperation 5% of the time. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
then that intentional stuff that's important. And I think that when you're watching it, like I think about like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when I'm only quoting horror movies, but that's what it is. When right before the first kill, you're outside of this big spooky house, and there's a girl in really short shorts, obviously, on a swing set, and the shot starts with her silhouette, and then it moves down, and all of a sudden, like as the audience, you go from being a spectator to like either a participant.
Jenna, are you there? Uh-oh. Hello?